This question is for Dan Burke, and my question is, you talked about individuals posting their thoughts and information for the intelligence community. At some point I had a feeling that there might be an information overload. Are you ever concerned that too much information can paralyze decision making?
I think throughout history we've been dealing with that problem. The question is that
can too much information paralyze an organization?
So the question is really information overload, just too much information out there. Yeah, I mean, I think we all deal with that at some level. What does Clay Shirky call it? Anyone remember? He doesn't call it information overload. He calls it filter failure. Thank you, Mark. Yes, yeah, so it's the idea that we have to improve our ability to organize it. So when the Gutenberg printing press came out, we had all of this information, and then we came up with the Dewey Decimal System to organize those books. And throughout time now, taxonomies were all parts of organizing that. I think we all have to deal with that as we move forward, and I think we see new techniques on the web. The intelligence community has it particularly difficult because there's all the information on the web, and then there's all the information on multiple networks therein, and so you have to manage it across many. It's not easy. I think wikis and blogs help because now you can aggregate important information, and the valuable information bubbles up as the people create links and relationships that matter.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Sean, and I'm from a venture capital firm out of New York. We harness thousands of entrepreneurs, academics, founders, and funders to decide where we invest our money. So every month we do a contest, and the community picks who we fund, and we fund. We've been recently asked by the federal government to apply that to social entrepreneurship and using that to pick which innovations will further the growth of the federal initiatives. My question is one very specific on identity, perhaps from the young lady from NASA. What role does identity play? For instance, in our community, who you are, what you say, you're all accountable for. Yeah. And we have a reputation market, and we keep track of everything. The federal government is very concerned about discrimination based on people's profiles and histories and even pictures. What role have you found in your organization identity to play in collective intelligence?
Well, I think we trust people based on what they do and what they say. So it's important that I know that when I go onto a social network, that I know I'm really talking to Don, for example. And one of the things I wanted to do in our social network was allow you to rate the people. Now there's some sensitivity because really they want you to rate the information and not the person, because if you rate the person, that could be perceived as, well, I don't like Joe. Well, that's not really what we mean. But we wanted to, like for expert identification, I really want to see that the people with the best answers on those particular topics bubble up. And that's the way I can do better expert identification. So what we wanted to do is give people more incentive to share and to look at them and say, oh, yeah. Sort of like in Slashdot, if I know that I have a rating of 5, I'm informative or whatever it is, and that I generally have a good rating, I'm more likely to go to that person for an answer. Because one of the challenges we found on another system that used some expert identification was they didn't ask the experts if they wanted to be identified. So when they started getting all these newbie questions, the people stopped participating. So we wanted to be able to look at how much did they participate, how helpful were their answers, and those people who participated a lot, had helpful answers, are more likely to be good. So a lot of our work gets done by who you know. So like I know so-and-so, I worked with them 5 years ago, and I'll talk to them, and by breaking down the barriers so that I don't hesitate to pick up the phone and get the answer, because I may not get the answer online, but I may have a better relationship with that person, and maybe that person can put me in touch with the person who does have the answer to my question. So identity is really important to us. So for our network, for example, we log in using e-authentication, so it's the same password I use everywhere else. Eventually it'll work with my, on the civilian side it's the PIV card, on the military or intelligence side it's the CAC card. But the idea is that I need to trust that you are you. And I also need to know that I can trust what you say because you know what, I've seen your reputation and you generally have good ideas, so I'll believe what you say. So does that answer your question?
Very much so, thank you.
Another question for you, Emma. I'm curious about your slide on the demographics, which is certainly something we see working with government agencies. How have you found the most effective to incentivize the sort of baby boomer generation to social media and things like this?
Well, okay, the question was, how do I incentivize the baby boomers? I really had to look at the different audience segments and understand that, I'm not just talking to IT people. I might be talking to people in procurement, people, in human resources, people in facilities. What is it that they need? And generally they're looking for, how do I get answers to my questions? How do I get help getting my job done? How can you make me do less work? So if there are things that I can do that help them get their job done, like one of them is by having these group collaboration tools. Typically people want to have a conversation and they want to share files and they don't have to wait to have something set up. If I can give them with a click of a mouse some quick tools so that they can go and start working with the people they want to work with, right, that saves them a lot of time and trouble. And then the other thing that we're doing is by having some of those auto forums like the equipment exchange. Well, I know the average baby boomer wants free stuff. So one of the things that I can do with this is say, well, look, if you're looking for this, because it's probably true in other agencies, but in our agency we have projects with a lot of funding and we have projects with like tiny, tiny funding. And so often people have to beg, borrow, or steal to get the things they want. And if they have ways that they can advertise, hey, does anybody have a spare XYZ part? That saves the government money if we don't have to buy it. And it's their incentive. So I actually planned that in, as I thought, I did a lot of stakeholder communication, met different people and asked, what is it that would help you use this? What are you interested in? And I focused on those three things I had, which was strengthen relationships, improve business processes, and drive innovation. So those are like get answers, make things easier, and make it so that I'll call you and I don't hesitate about it. Okay?
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm sure that people have questions for the other guys too.
So I guess this is a question for the whole panel, right? Let's say we bite the bullet and accept that collective intelligence on net is better in terms of coming up with decision making than other forms of decision making, right? My question is, what are the failure states? That is to say, it seems that any sort of system of organization has particularly bad circumstances where it's going to make particularly bad decisions because of preference cascades or something like that. What are the dark sides of engaging in decision making using this mechanism?
The buck was passed to me here. Well, I think that the other way to think about it is there's certainly, like, what are the failure states that are different than the ones that we have today? I don't know that they're substantially different. Like, nothing pops out from a model perspective to be like, these are going to be incredibly different. But rather, one way that I model collective intelligence is pushing out information sooner. So you're going to know the answer eventually. You're just not going to be, by the time you know it, it's a banality and not actually very useful to you. So if you can, maybe in the case, to use two examples, one is with the World Bank with GDP, like by the time you know GDP, it's not a question, you can't react to it, it's kind of ex post. And in the case of parts and budget, it's like, great, the fiscal year's over, the money goes back, no one is better, it's Pareto inefficient. There was a Pareto preferred outcome that you could have had here. So I think the model is it's not so radical as to say this is a fundamentally different way of doing something. It's here's a framework, collective intelligence. You can apply it to get incremental progress, and in some cases, very radical progress, like the destruction of Circuit City as a business. But I think in most cases, that's probably a tail occurrence. Like in most cases, or I'll be employing this to destroy everyone else, but you're going to get incremental, constant improvement.
I have 4 words: snakes on a plane. Failure of collective intelligence. Just because people are talking about it and it's a popular topic, you still need to get a little more depth to that.
A lot of organizations are in the habit of collecting information and making forecasts even though they don't use them. It's just kind of a scientific, businessy thing to do. And if you give them new technologies, they kind of do it more, but until they realize that they aren't using it, and then they stop. So one of the failure modes is you just don't realize that you don't want this intelligence. Another thing is that even if you want it, the cost can be high. It costs something to talk to people, have people interact. Sometimes it's just not worth the effort. Sometimes, what you get from having one person do something is better than having people talk, because they just talk and talk and talk.
I would add one more thing. At the end of the day, at least with prediction markets, the decisions that are made by an organization still have to be made by concrete individuals. So a prediction market may say that this bad thing is going to happen, but that still doesn't answer the question, what do you do about that bad thing? And it still doesn't answer the question, why did the participants in that market say that this thing is going to happen? You don't know that. You just know that this is what the market says.